about to get the constitution. And then we did away with section 2A, Matigari and the Queen. You may not remember this, but you do countries of this. We did away with it. And the politicians at that time then said, we then don't need a constitution because they thought that they would get into power. That was a false start. Things then remained until 1997 again. Then they thought they would get power and they didn't get power. Then in 2002, they thought they would get power and they didn't get it. And in the year 2004, I remember this very clearly, that's why you say it's intergeneration. I remember John Bishop saying this, and I went and confronted him. When we were debating, he said, no, we did not need a new constitution. What we wanted was power. We are now in power. And I told him, John, I thought we needed a new constitutional dispensation. He said, no, we did not. And I remember it is until the year 2010, after we nearly killed each other, went into civil war in 2007, that we now had a new constitutional dispensation. So all these things happened because, as a nation, do we have the thing called, in fact, I think one of the loneliest things in this country is to be Kenyan. One of the loneliest things. If you are a true Kenyan, you are very lonely. I've found myself in a number of WhatsApp groups which are ethnic. Kamba, I don't know who put me there, but I don't speak. Perhaps if I speak, they'll know I'm there. I'm in one, and you can, some of them are young people that I taught the other day. And they say, we now have power, we must protect it. They're saying that. The Gen Zs in that group, I'm in one of my ethnic group. There are two individuals who are appointed into cabinet recently. They say, this is now our thing in that ethnic group. So, and when you look at the political players now, I was counting the other day, the leading opposition leader, for example, in this country, has been in 13 political formations since 1992. If the English say is that a rolling stone gathers no moss, he has gathered no moss. And I think, therefore, when you talk about social revolution, part of our problem as a country is to identify a political philosophy that defines who we are. That is why I was very worried when the Gen Z said, you are formless, we are tribeless, we are leaderless. What is that? That is formless, that is tribeless, that is leaderless. It cannot be sustained. But the idea, and I think Professor Mairu is, through this book, is trying to erect kiosks and make food and eat them, and there is no toilet anywhere. We are a shameless society. So we need to reorder our society. And I understand this book in that context. You younger people, I don't know whether you've read a book called Miseducation of the Negro. If you haven't read it, it's by Carter G. Woodson, written in 1933. Because part of our problem is education. We are so thoroughly miseducated that we've got to unlearn some things and re-educate ourselves. And I was in Nigeria 2 weeks ago, and I sat next to a gentleman who is 75 years of age, he's a dentist. And he told me, in Africa we have many problems. One of them is low self-esteem. Even when we don't know it, we have low self-esteem. And I want to use that in the context of the two positions at the UN. How many positions at the UN are not given to continents? They are given to countries. And you know, when you hear them speaking, the African continent will have two positions, but without veto power. I mean, it is an insult to a population of nearly 1.5 billion. Remember, the UN was created in 1945 when we were all colonies. We were never actually meant, we are grafted into the thing. So there is need to reorder and to rethink the world. And we can only do so, as David here rightly says, if we stop thinking in silos. And I want to conclude with two incidents. One, 1997, Nyerere speaking in Ghana, and he was apologizing on behalf of his generation. He said that there are things that we should have done. This thing called African unity. He said, whenever I travel, people don't care whether I'm Tanzanian or Ghanaian or Kenya or Uganda, they just know about Africa. So it is your generation to push the agenda forward. If you look at East Africa, there is a document that was generated fast-tracking East African Federation. According to that document, we ought to have had a single currency in 2009, and we ought to have had our president in 2010, the East African Federation president. It is now much more unlikely as we move. But we are weak. And when you are weak and disorganized, you will be dominated. And that is why we are dominated. And you, the Gen Z, the message that is being sent.
And without a doubt, he concludes that it is the leadership. He uses one of the characters to bring out that message in the various conversations and discussions, agreements, disagreements, applications, to bring out the message that it is a failure of leadership, very much within the same context as Chinua Achebe has done in the little book titled The Trouble with Nigeria, that you can say it's simply and squarely a question of failed leadership. And so within that prism of failed and failing leadership, you see, when the leadership has failed, then it fails the people, and the wider society itself also begins failing. Such that, like the young people that we're going to encounter in this book, we are failing to get employment. Education that we get itself fails to place us, professor, in the legal practice where you are, in spite of the fact that we may have studied law and we may be potentially some of the finest in that particular docket. We fail to get the opportunity to practice. We fail even to make families. You're going to find here young people who are in love. One of the themes that are very recurrent in the Maidu Ove is the relationship, the man-woman relationship, interaction. And this time, you see him bringing it again. You see him bringing up once again the theme of the gender relations, the man-woman relationship, not just in the context of its intimacy or the absence of it, but in terms of the social interactions where there are socially constructed roles in gender, and the argument